a couple of books with him.
Yeah.
Which, from what I gathered, the publishers were having a hard time getting that project moving. Was bringing you on board, did that help?
I don't know.
No? I'm talking about Old Mars and Old Venus, if anyone hasn't read them. It's a fantastic collection of, well, actually, I'll let George describe them.
Yeah, yeah, Gardner and I decided, Gardner has been an anthologist for a long time, and I had these anthology ideas that I wanted to do, but I didn't necessarily have the time to do them all by myself, so we decided to partner up. And, you know, when you do an anthology, there's a lot of, you know, you have to select the writers and solicit to writers and get them to sign on, and you assemble your table of contents that way, and then they give them a deadline, they send them the stories, you give them notes, they revise the stories. So there's all this creative work. But there's also a great deal of donkey work where you have to, you know, you have to vet the contract, and you have to get all the, prepare contracts for the writers, 20 some odd writers, and send the writers and get the writers to sign the contract. Sometimes the writers want to negotiate some term in the contract, you got to deal with that. And then the money comes in, and you got to pay the writers and divide up the money, and it's pro rata, so it's according to the length of the story. That's a complex calculation. You got royalties coming in and foreign sales. And, you know, that kind of stuff can really add up to a big time-consuming thing, and I didn't have the time. So Gardner and I agreed we'd share the creative work together, and he would do all the donkey work, because he was already doing all the donkey work for a lot of his other anthologies, his Best of the Year that he's been doing for a long time, and he does anthologies with Jack Dan and with Jonathan Strahan and numerous other people. So we did a number of anthologies together, and Old Mars and Old Venus were two of them. You know, it's Gardner and I are both old. We were young once, in fact, when we first met, but now we're old. And we remember Old Mars and Old Venus, which were the versions of the planets that existed before we actually knew what the planets were actually like. And unfortunately, what the planets are actually like is far more boring than what we thought they were like. They were much more interesting before the Mariner and the other probes reached them. You know, Mars had Martians, and it had dead cities and dead sea bottoms, and it had Tharks and Thotes and, you know, ruins of vanished races and all sorts of cool things. And Venus was full of dinosaurs and web-footed Venusians and etc. So we wanted to write some retro science fiction stories about Old Mars and Old Venus, and that's what we did.
You really feel the love for the genre in those stories.
Yes, yes. They were a lot of fun to edit.
Oh, I can
Old
imagine.
Venus came out last year, so if any of you read it and enjoy it, remember those stories in there are eligible for the Hugo this year. You can nominate those. Not Old Mars, that was the year before.
How did you meet Gardner? Two of you go way back.
Gardner was, I met Gardner, he was the first person I met at the first science fiction convention I attended, 1971, Washington, D.C., Disclave. I walked in, and Gardner was sitting behind the registration desk, so he took my $3, which is what it cost to join a convention in those days, and gave me my badge. And when I told him my name, he said, "Oh, I bought your story," because I'd sold exactly 2 stories at that time. One of them, the first one, only one that appeared in print yet, and that was the Galaxy magazine. And Gardner, in addition to being a writer himself, was the slush pile reader for Galaxy. So he had fished my story out of the slush pile and passed it along to the editor, and it had purchased it, and it was the hero, my first sale. So Gardner was the first person to see my stuff as a professional, and the first person to meet me as a fan.
Let's go over to Westeros for a little bit. Your main religion there discusses, it's built around a pantheon of 7 gods. Do you have characters in mind that you associate with each particular aspect of the god?
Characters? What do you mean?
When you're writing it, do you have, do you see any particular characters as embodiments that capture the spirit?
Well, they're each archetypes, you know. They're not individual people. You know, in the faith of 7 is loosely based on the Roman Catholic Church of the Middle Ages. I was raised Catholic, although I'm not a practicing Catholic any longer, and you know, we always had the Trinity as the heart of that, which as a kid I had a lot of trouble understanding. And now that I'm a grown-up, I still have a lot of trouble understanding it. So you got the Father, you got the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and we got one God. And I ask you, wait a minute, so we have three gods. As Catholics, we have three. No, we only have one God, Son. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. That's three. No, they're three, but they're one. They're all one. Okay. So I just contribute to 3 to 7, you know. We have one God, we're monotheists, but he has 7 aspects. And, you know, Maiden Mother Crone, of course, half of it is traditional pagan triple goddess. That's, you know, I stole that from the pagans. And then I added the 3 male aspects to it, Father, Warrior, and Smith. And then I added the stranger to just be strange and a little unusual. The other, the unknowable, the unthinkable there. So, and thus created the 7, where most of the peasants say, okay, we have 7 gods. No, you have one God. One God with 7 aspects, and here are their faces. So they have 7 faces, so there's 7 of no, there's one. Okay, there's one. Yeah, and you know, the Father, the Son is the Son of the Father, even though they're the same, and the Holy Ghost, he never gets any respect. We don't know. He got Mary pregnant at one point, and that seems to be all he ever does. Periodically, he delivers a message to an angel or something like that. The Holy Ghost is like the Father whistles them up. Say, I got another virgin. We got to get pregnant here. Get on down there. I don't know, but.
Don't
I'm
look
sorry,
for logic.
you're saying decades of Catholic education here. Confused schoolboy education here, trying to understand it all.
You can't look for logic there. They think Sunday is 3 days after Friday also. We're at about the halfway point, so let's see a show of hands. Who's got questions? All right, I guess let's start a line down the center aisle, and Jerry will help with a mic.
You got this.
All right, just give us your name and your question.
Hello, my name's Jeffrey. I wanted to let you know I watched the shows before I read the books, and as I'm reading through them, I'm really sort of mesmerized by the foreshadowing elements that you use, and sometimes it seems more like a political mystery than it does a high fantasy. Can you talk about your technical process for creating the puzzle that we have to put together as readers?
I can talk about them, but I'm not sure you'll have any more success in understanding the answer than I did with the Trinity. I just think of these things, and you know, I put in things that I think I'll pay off later, little hints and foreshadowings as you do, and sometimes I do pay them off, and sometimes later in the book I go back and take out the foreshadowings because I've sort of drifted away from them. But a lot of it takes place on a subconscious level. There are writers. Writers work in very different ways, and I've often said there are 2 main types of writers: the architect and the gardener. And the architect plans everything ahead of time very painstakingly, like an architect designing a house. He knows how many floors they're going to be in, how many rooms on each floor, and where the plumbing is going to go, and where the plugs are going to go in each room, and what the roof is going to be made of, and etc. And all of this is determined and blueprinted out before the first board is sewn or the first nail is driven. The gardener just sort of plants a seed, and he waters it, and he sees what comes up, and you know, he knows certain things. He knows whether he planted an avocado or an oak tree, but a lot of it is much more organic. And I think all writers are combinations of these. Very few are pure architects or pure gardeners, but they lean one way or another. And I'm much more gardener than I am an architect, as were other writers, like Tolkien, for example, was also much more gardener. But there are architects out there. So a lot of my process takes place, and I don't know where it's coming from, but ideas come to me and concepts come to me, and I work with them.
I'm DJ. I was also raised Catholic. Thank you for taking me down memory lane. I have an unusual question, I guess, for the crowd. Is Ryan Fitzpatrick really worth more than $10 million if Rex Ryan can keep getting into his head?
Well, if the alternative is Geno Smith, yes. We have to have some quarterback, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is the best quarterback we've had since Chad Pennington. Chad Pennington, we're talking about New York Jets football here, by the way. People who are
I was lost.
Going out. Chad Pennington is the great tragedy of the New York Jets in recent years, because I think Chad Pennington was a sensational quarterback. He was drafted in the same year as Tom Brady, but 5 rounds higher. And people look at that now and say, oh, you were so stupid, Jets, you took Pennington, you could have had Brady. But at the time, Pennington looked like a much better prospect than Brady. And indeed, initially, he played just as well, if not better, than Brady. When he retired, he had the highest completion average in the entire history of the NFL. Very, very smart quarterback, very accurate quarterback, made very few mistakes. Real team leader. The team loved him and rallied behind him. But he was just too fragile. He kept getting hurt. And every time he got hurt, he would come back. He's the only player who was twice NFL Comeback Player of the Year, coming back from devastating injuries. That's a considerable achievement for him, but the fact that he kept getting devastating injuries was not good. And his arm kept getting weaker and weaker. And by the end, he had this reputation of being a really smart, accurate quarterback with a weak arm. But he didn't have a weak arm when he entered the league. His arm was just as strong as Brady's, or indeed as any of the other quarterbacks coming out at the time. But repeated breaking of wrists and rotator cuffs and other things that he kept breaking weakened that arm, even when he came back. So that was a real pity. And then Mark Sanchez never worked out. Geno Smith was a disaster. So Fitzy is the best we've seen in a long while. So let's hope last year was not